Thank you.
Good morning. Okay, I need to hear a louder good morning from you guys. So I know that was a pretty intense session with a lot of stuff in the 20-25 minutes that we have. As she called out, as part of my introduction, I had the Realsense evangelism. I think it's in the wrong mode. Can I just... So I'll just take one question that was left out from the earlier session, is building a community around Realsense. How many of you have heard of MSDN? Probably everybody, right? I should probably see all the hands up. So Intel also has a developer forum. It's called as Intel Developer Zone. Have you heard about it? Excellent. So Intel Developer Zone has a dedicated section for Realsense. That's where you can go get the SDKs, you can look at videos, download the samples, and there's a very active community of Intel engineers as well as developer community which contribute on that forum. So it's pretty active, so I would really want you to go check that out. I'm not going to talk about Realsense much. What I'm really going to talk about is a topic which is very close to my heart. This is a new project that we launched very recently at Intel. Let me start with introduction. So I work as a software business manager at Intel, enabling the ISV and the developer ecosystem across Asia, Pacific, and Japan. So we have started calling it APJ, just that it doesn't confuse you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to what we're trying to do as part of this project, and then I have my engineer here who's going to dig a little deeper into showing you an example and how to do it based on what we have currently. So let's get started. So I'm very proudly announcing something called as Project Janwani. This is probably the first public forum where I'm going to talk about Janwani. I've done it previously, but more at Intel events. This is, I'm really calling out saying that this is one project that we started out understanding the need that it really is important to start enabling for speech, and more specifically enabling for local language input. So we started this project internally. We now have a public-facing version of it. It's again on IDZ, that's Intel Developer Zone. I know Raj towards the end has a link to that site as well. But that said, Project Janwani really, I'm going to talk about that in more detail, but that's the agenda. So we're going to understand what Project Janwani is all about, understand why speech is so important. I mean, there have been so technology advances in terms of a lot of areas. You saw depth technology, you saw all of that happening at really blazing speeds. But speech is one thing that really gets, I don't know, sidelined or ignored at some point. And then when we talk to the industry and talk to a lot of people, I mean, literally India is like down the list. So it's really our initiative. We want you guys to work together with us, with Intel, and see how we can up-level that, start enabling for local language. What are we going to learn today? We are going to learn about how to enable it based on what we have in terms of the current platform, and then summarize it. So what is Project Janwani? So you have seen speech being enabled at various levels. You must have seen font supports coming out for Indian languages. You must have seen how Unicode really evolved itself from supporting Indian languages. So now it's really time to move beyond. Why? I probably have some use cases that talks about that. But let me throw out a question out here. All of you are from, I mean, let me ask a question first. How many of you are programming for Windows? Android? Okay. iOS? Others? Okay, never mind. So I see that a bunch of hands went up for Windows, which is good because it still is dominant platform. We are very committed to Microsoft. We are working together. Windows becomes very interesting because that is one platform where it's really, you can really write your own stuff in a way that you would want to be integrated into the platform. Now the second question is, how many of you have played with speech in the past, in any form? Okay, one hand. See? This kind of answers my earlier problem, right? I mean, for whatever reasons, we don't look at it. And I'll tell you, like when I started in this project and started working in it, the first pushback that I really got is, man, it's really complicated. It's for the data scientists. It's for distinguished engineers to work on very serious algorithms. Seriously, Raj will show you literally how simple it is. So the answer to that question is that it's extremely simple. It's because along with the other technologies like depth, speech has also evolved. And it has evolved to a level where you can simply take 3 steps and start enabling your apps and websites. And we're going to look at that. So why is speech input important? It's a very natural way of interacting with computers, right? I mean, of course, you saw hand gestures, you saw face recognition, you saw kind of very interesting stuff. What really, I'll leave you with the thought that these are very natural way of interacting with the computer. We have been traditionally used to using the keyboard, the mouse, to maybe certain Kinect kind of use cases where you stand and it kind of detects your, the body structure and everything. But if you really look at personal computer usage, the more natural you get, the more interesting use cases evolve from that. And speech is also playing a very important part of that. I have a use cases list which talks about that in more detail. It also enables one to penetrate into very difficult markets. Right? Like, I know at each of our organizations we do this tiering. We consider metros and we look at tier 2 cities, tier 3 and so on. But the one thing that can really penetrate into those, let's say tier 3 or tier 4 cities is speech in a very big way. Because I know there's just challenges where dialects are there and all of that, but at least somebody needs to take that step, needs to start understanding the market, need to get that intelligence back. I know there was a question earlier on speech is, does the engine evolve on itself? Does it learn on its own? Really? I mean, we are developers here, right? That's something that we should be writing. We cannot rely on the computer or the OS manufacturers and all of those guys to write those engines. So here's a start. Let's start developing apps. Let's try building those engines and then form a community where all of these can come together. And then the other important thing is that your apps and websites starts behaving intelligent, right? Today, there's a war. There are so many apps out there. There are so many websites out there. But how do you really differentiate? Speech could be a very important differentiator. That when you do marketing, when you talk to your marketing teams within your organizations, you can start differentiating your website from others by speech enabling. Let's move on. I know Raj has a lot of content to cover. So what you're going to learn today, you're going to learn how do you enable your website using W3C standards. I believe everybody knows about W3C, right? Yes? Do you know speech is a very important component of that? See? That's the problem. So you need to learn about that. Raj is going to show you examples. W3C, I don't know if we have examples that we can show in a public forum. We did a lot of experimenting internally, so you can always catch him offline. We have some very pretty cool demos, which obviously we cannot show on the stage, but you can catch him and he'll show you some websites which we played with and enabled for using W3C. Untitled Realsense. I mean, you must be wondering, like, this guy runs Realsense. There was a Realsense session and Realsense nowhere on his slides. It obviously is. So speech is a very important component of Realsense. Realsense, as part of the core speech engine, supports like 8 or 9 languages. However, the core engine, which is English, has a mechanism, and Raj is going to talk about more detail, where you can do some pretty cool and interesting and accurate stuff using stuff like transliteration. He's going to show you some examples on how do you really take Hindi, or I don't know which languages he's going to show on the stage, but you can take those languages, put a really interesting Realsense layer on top of it, and start enabling your websites or apps or what have you. So back to what I was talking about. When you naturally interact with your app or website, it's like you're putting human senses into it, right? So what speech is trying to do, it's trying to put 2 senses, which is the recognition, which is the hearing part of it, where the computer can really hear you out, and speech synthesis. So if I were to divide speech enabling, it would really fall into these 2 buckets, which is speech recognition and speech synthesis. This is not going to be a very detailed session on all of the engines and everything. What we are going to focus on is how do you put the senses using what you have today. So when to use speech? After this slide, promise me I'm going to pass it on to him. I know everybody is like very eager on seeing the technical implementation over here. So when to use speech? When you really need to concentrate on something, like for example you're driving and you have your tablet or your PC next to you and you would really want to give speech commands, and I'm sure that we use it in some form or the other, but we do not really use speech. So that's because accuracy, dialect, all that falls in. But imagine you're driving and you're talking local language. You would want to try that, right? So yes, that's where concentration is. Children, I think we have an example of spelling where he's going to show you on how do you spell using synthesis and all of that. It's pretty easy. It's part of the SDK. For small devices and wearables, IoT is going to be a big thing. There will be at some point where everything will converge. Right now it's separate, Realsense separate and all of that, but yes, this is pretty interesting and important. And then for the differently abled, right? I mean, if you want somebody, let's say, who has a disability and wants to interact with the PC, speech becomes a very important thing. So I'm going to leave you with these ideas. I'm going to pass it on to Raj now to really walk you through what Realsense has to offer and what W3C has to offer. With Realsense, we also have some pretty cool examples that he's going to show you. He's also going to show you how easy it is and what does it take from a coding point of view to go implement that. So over to Raj.
Thanks, Parag. So, how many of you really wanted to integrate speech in your apps at some point in time? Fantastic. And this is your opportunity. The technology is quite simple now to integrate. It's production ready. You can integrate in your systems today. And we'll show you how simple it is and how easy is it for you to make it into the commercial world. So essentially, we have if your app needs to listen, and especially given India is a diverse country, you want to reach out to the next set of user base who cannot probably read, write. Huge population of India is that way. So I know the speech in local language, in the Indian language, Hindi, Tamil, Kannada, you name the language, you can reach out to those user base which you have not yet covered today. So difficult markets, Parag, as he mentioned, you can reach out to those new market segments and kind of let them talk to your application in a very natural way in your mother tongue. So what are the steps? Very simple, 3 steps. We define the user experience first. Kind of user experience is the way what the user says to the system and what the system responds back in terms of the visual and the audio. So that's the user experience. Once we define the experience, because the core part of speech is all about defining the experience in a way that makes sense for the user to kind of comprehend, because you're dealing with different type of users. For example, elders or children who have a different kind of comprehension level. Or if you're driving, then what kind of, so different interaction models, different type of user experience. Then you add a few lines of code, and then test it. So for example, let's take for example a small application where you're helping a child learn. So your app is an education app and trying to ask few questions to the child, and it's a multiple choice quiz question, right? And the answers could be like few commands that the child has to talk back in the native language. So the first step of the experience is to identify those commands. The interaction paradigm is to identify those commands, and we'll show a demo of the. So here is a web page. So assume you have a web page. So this works on. The screen is not coming. 1 second. Okay, so this is, assume you have a website that you want to enable for speech and reach out to more audience than what you have today. Or you have an app. So this technology works on either on the web, on the HTML5, or on apps. So you could have a microphone that is either wireless, or most of the systems today use inbuilt audio technology. We have the Intel Smart Sound technology in most of the systems starting 2014. So that has provided a beautiful microphone in most of the devices, the laptops and the ultrabooks. So the first step is to make sure the system is listening when you're developing a speech app. We'll show you how simple it is. Only small 3-4 set of tricks to kind of keep in mind when you develop the system. First step is to basically check whether your system, hello check. So you see the system is able to kind of listen to the ambient noise. Now, this is a web page. It could be running offline. You can also have an online app. Hello, Abhinandan, Naveen Varshaya. So here you see, the various commands in the local language. This could be anything that you actually put together. For example, if it is Hindi or Kannada or any local language, the model is very simple. How we define is essentially, so essentially we use an English engine recognizer, right? And then the audio comes in, and then you actually have a set of grammar here. These are commands that the system is expected to kind of understand. So for example, if the user speaks any one of those keywords, then it will come out into this into the recognized word. And how do you actually make an English engine into a local language engine so that you can create your own custom thing? So for example, you actually have Dhanyavad and Namaste. What you do is actually write down in the same thing in the English word and then feed it to the engine. So once the user speaks, it's recognized as one of the words, and then we actually map it back to the local language. So that's how simple it is to actually kind of integrate. So if you want to kind of quickly go ahead today and kind of prototype it, what you need to do is download the Intel Realsense SDK from the, just Google for the Intel Realsense SDK. It will work on your laptops or your disk systems. No need for the speech component, no need for a separate hardware, because most of you has the thing. Then you actually have the speech recognition engine here. So this one has the samples that we have. So the source code is right there in the system. So you can look at the documentation and then get started today. It's like, it should take less than like few hours for you to actually get your app integrated with speech in your native language, so you can reach out to users. And it can be hosted online. And for people who, if you're targeting a user where this is SDK runtime is not installed, automatically the system will detect and then show the SDK runtime needs to be downloaded. So then once the user downloads, then the browser gets activated. So it works on all browsers, i.e. Firefox and Chrome, because it works through a runtime. And you can support all the languages that you think of across the globe. Just to summarize the approach, identify the commands that you want to kind of understand, put it in English, and then feed it to the system with the sample code that you will download from the Intel Realsense SDK. It's available on the, you just Google for the Intel Realsense SDK, you can download it and install in your systems. The next one, so this one actually uses the Realsense engine runs on the device. It's a nuance engine. There is also a new standard that's evolving. It's not yet a standard, but it's a specification from the W3C consortium on speech, which lets more broader browsers to implement speech. So the first one to implement is Google Chrome, which is a fantastic implementation of speech. And this one I'll understand like the Google Now engine that you have in the Android phone. You can have your apps enabled with the Google Cloud implementation. So again, the approach here is the same thing, identify the user experience. So here you can look at, like, for example, things like show me flights from X to Y, or in English, or in Hindi. So the Google engines today supports English in Indian accent as well as the Hindi language, whereas the Realsense engine allows you to kind of feed in more languages of your choice, because you're actually doing a transliteration. So these two languages are supported today on the Chrome browser. So you can actually go ahead and try it out. It's a very, very easy implementation, couple of lines of code to actually get your speech, get your website to listen to what's happening in the microphone. So we have few demos, very compelling demos, but we cannot show it on a stage for whatever confidentiality reasons, because of certain confidential reasons. But you are welcome to kind of come over here or to the just after the session and look at the demos. We cannot show it on a stage, but we can show it in person. So so the thing is, how it happens is there's audio coming in, and then the recognized word the engine actually goes to the, so the audio goes to the cloud. The engine in the cloud actually gives you the words that were spoken, and then actually you do a natural language processing, and then you will actually kind of take the action. So typical UI pattern is actually to have one of the key things to, this is one of the tips most people might miss, and then we'll have a different type of, so one simple tip is to actually display the user the list of commands that needs to be spoken. Because because the computer can understand, computer has a small brain compared to a human brain. So one is to actually educate the user, hey, here are the list of speech commands that I can understand as a computer. So you kind of let them know that, and then let them speak those few commands that you have understand in your system. So once they speak that, then you can actually pick up using simple string processing or an NLP engine you can have to actually understand that and then move ahead. So the key tip here is to kind of display what to speak to the user, right? Like how you have buttons, and this thing here is to kind of give those tips to the user. So once you give that, actually the recognition accuracy is very, very high. You almost get like more than 95% on Hindi and Indian English. We encourage both approaches, but you can make a choice for your particular use case. Internet, if it's available, then go for cloud-based engine. If you want it in an offline application, probably more instant response, then you can use the Nuance. If you want a more free form, then you choose the Google one. And then if you have specific commands, then the Realsense engine will help you. If you want more languages and specific commands, then the Realsense engine will help. The Hindi and Indian accent, English is good in Google. So the next couple of minutes, we'll just look at, we saw how to add ears to your application. Now can you put mouth to your application? So that's speech synthesis. This one is in English though, and for you to integrate, it's very, very simple, just like one line of code. And that one line of code is also very simple. You just say to the system, voice synthesis.speak, and then put the text that you want to speak, and there are like various parameters there, which we'll just run a demo of that. So here we have what to speak, and then various ways to pronounce that. Like for example, if you have a spell, then you can actually it will spell it out in the word. So we'll just look at this. Okay. Connect audio. Okay, hopefully the audio jack is connected to the speaker.
Hello, Realsense. Do you want to add human-like senses into your app? What is the spelling of apple? A-P-P-L-E. Now can you spell it for me?
Grandma is here, children. Do you want me to tell you a story?
Hello, Realsense. Do you want to add human-like senses into your app? What is the spelling of apple? A-P.
Okay, so I think it's looping there. So So that's all. It's quite simple. So you can adjust the parameters to actually kind of have different voices, like grandma voice coming in by adjusting the speech rate. So those things you can play with. So we would encourage you to really kind of try it out. If you want to engage with Intel on very compelling use cases, we'll be happy to collaborate. So Parag, his email ID is here and my email ID is there. Feel free to reach out via here if you want to look at some of the other demos. But really we are looking for kind of exciting the Indian market ecosystem to actually do the next level on speech, especially in the Indian languages. So we're looking for like potential kind of applications that could be enabled. So if you have one of those, feel free to kind of reach out to Parag or me. We're just here. Any questions at this point? Parag, why don't you come on the stage?
Yeah, that's okay. Any questions?
So I have 2 questions.
I'll just give you the mic because we'd like to cover the question on the video.
The first question is, when you're doing the phonetics to textual like conversion in the first stage, like is it your own algorithm or is it like the HTML5 API that we have already? And the second question is that when you say you have converted the phonetics into text, which is basically in English, and you are transliterating to Indian languages, like transliteration has the inherent issues of like converting like the matras, like the bari e, soti and stuff like that, double e and versus I. How are we handling this? So I think a lot of people are working on this voice conversion, but I think this is the inherent issues that many people have been trying to kind of solve. But I'm curious, how are you handling those kinds of things?
Sure. So the engine is essentially based on Nuance engine. The Realsense engine is a Nuance engine. We have exposed it through a technology access layer on the web, so that your web apps could actually be enabled. On the specific thing, it's only a trial and kind of an experimentation where you actually try out the various things in local language and then listen. So it's an iterative process. So we don't have a kind of a automated.
So to answer it specifically, we are aware of the nuances. You have to do a trial and error to reach a perfect match. So what you see over here, I know Raj has spent a lot of time setting it up and getting the right transliterated English version of it. So obviously you'll have to play with the E's and I's and A's to make sure that the recognition is pretty accurate.
So that comes the follow-up question. I was wondering if you can kind of support dialects which doesn't have actual
so dialects will be an issue. I'll tell you why. Because Hindi as a core language is not supported. We are doing transliteration on top of it.
That's exactly the point. Why I'm saying is that we don't need a script to support the dialect because we are already using English. So if you don't need a text in your website or in your application, you just want, say, like some dialect, some kid from, say, a remote village which uses a language which doesn't have a script, wants to interact with the app, then you can just use the English translation, and you don't need a script to rewrite that. Exactly that's why.
The approach actually allows you to support any number of dialects, so it's very easy to actually take a dialect and kind of code it into the system.
So let's do this in the interest of time. Is there any other question? We can always take it offline.
Yeah, sure.
Any other question? All right, so thank you. You have the contact details. We look forward to interacting with you. If there are any compelling use cases, please work with us. We want to grow the ecosystem. It's just a start, and it will only be successful through you. So please let us know. Thank you.